We begin this news hour in Glasgow, where the UN Climate Summit has turned its focus to finance, with firms controlling trillions of dollars in private sector capital promising to help fund the global transition to green economies and achieve net zero carbon emissions. Hundreds of the world's biggest banks, insurers and investment funds have joined an alliance to help developing nations finance the shift to renewable energy. Meanwhile, the UK Chancellor Rishi Sunak also announced that London will become the world's first net zero financial centre.
Over the next 5 years, we will deliver a total of $500 billion of investment to the countries that need it most. And we can do more today. I can announce that the United Kingdom will commit £100 million to the Task Force on Access to Climate Finance, making it quicker and easier for developing countries to access the finance they need. And we're supporting a new capital markets mechanism, which will issue billions of new green bonds here in the UK to fund renewable energy in developing countries.
I agree we must all do more, and the United States is stepping up. President Biden has already announced that we're quadrupling our international climate finance for developing countries by 2024 to more than $11 billion. This morning, as part of our continued efforts, I'm pleased to join the UK in announcing that the United States also intends to fully support the Climate Investment Fund's capital markets mechanism.
Well, let's cross live to Glasgow, where Arise correspondents Philip Crowther and Laila Jonhson-Salami are waiting to speak to us from the COP26 summit. Gentlemen and lady, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So today is Finance Day at the COP26 summit. I understand that mainstream and private finance turned up there in large numbers. Philip, tell us more about what's been happening there today.
Well, look, Finance Day is the day where we have to try and get around the jargon as much as we possibly can. It's a day of complex announcements concerning governments, the private sector, big financial institutions as well. But an umbrella term, if you will, is that that governments and the private sector clearly now saying it out loud that they want to be part of the climate change solution, if you will. Now, all of the announcements that were made today will also invite a little bit of healthy skepticism, one would have to say, with some think tanks saying that those announcements today were a great thing, others saying, well, look, some of the investors who would have been investing in fossil fuel companies and are saying that they are now going to do less of that, well, they've got their hands dirty a little bit. So this is the day where you really have to look out for who exactly is making these announcements, what have they invested in the past. But I think, look, first of all, you have to say that anything that brings big financial institutions, that gets big banks on board toward carbon neutrality, be it within their own companies or in those that they are investing in, is of course good news. But skepticism always has to be in there as well.
Well, quite. And Laila, the message, just trying to distill it as far as we can possibly do, the message seems to be that climate risk is financial risk. But is that message now widely understood? Does it look like the industry wants to play its part in cutting carbon emissions?
Well, it's very interesting, Charles, because what you have here is about 450 of the largest institutions and financial institutions and companies in the world signing up to this agreement. Now, these are 450 institutions that probably control about $130 trillion of financial assets in the world. It does sound like great news, but just outside the walls of the Scottish Event Campus, the story is very different. On the streets of Glasgow today, Extinction Rebellion held the largest protest that's happened in Glasgow so far since COP26 happened. hundreds of people came onto the streets protesting against exactly what was going on in here, because people genuinely do not believe that the message is as clear as the government, Rishi Sunak, etc., are trying to put it across. It's all well and good to say we're signing up to these agreements, but are these companies who genuinely believe that they can stop funding fossil fuel projects? Are these companies who genuinely are going to stop funding fossil fuel projects? That's still unclear, because although the 2023 deadline has been set, it's not necessarily mandatory for companies to genuinely say that they are going to commit to a low carbon future. So we really have to wait and see what happens here. It's weird. The conversations going on outside the halls of the Scottish Event Campus are very different to the conversations going on in here. You have a lot of people in Glasgow right now who do not believe anything that world leaders are saying.
That's a very interesting and arguably very correct observation. Philip, significant deals nevertheless being struck so far at COP26, but as Laila was hinting there, many issues remain to be resolved. How would you assess progress so far?
Well, look, there are those big agreements, two of which were made yesterday that are real headline items and will still be those in, what are we looking at, 9 days' time now before the end of this COP26 climate conference. And that is the main day, of course. In 9 days' time, we'll have to see a communique, an agreement between all 196 countries who signed on to the Paris Agreement. We will have to see an agreement from them as to how exactly they're going to get to that goal of global warming not going above 1.5 degrees Celsius. I should say that right now, according to the most recent estimates, and there are new ones coming in pretty much every day here at this climate conference from different think tanks, for example, estimates are not good. 1.9 degrees Celsius is the latest one that has been bandied around here at the climate conference, and of course that is not good enough, is it? So those announcements, first of all, on methane gas being limited to 30%, I should say, by the end of the year 2030, by over 100 countries who signed on to that one, is a very significant one. The one that has 100 countries, also over 100 countries signing on to stopping deforestation by the year 2030, is also a very significant one, and something that, of course, we also have to add a little bit of skepticism to. There have been agreements like that one before. There have been promises made like that one before. Take this back to the Earth Summit in Rio in the early 90s. Take this back to the Declaration of New York in 2014. Those were similar declarations, and deforestation went up since then. But again, everybody here right now, especially with world leaders having left yesterday largely, everybody here now concentrating on one main goal. All of the people that you see wandering around here, the thing they most care about are the negotiations that are happening right now in all of these side rooms that are around these hallways of this campus. And behind us you see the plenary room for the most important meetings out of all of them. What's being negotiated? Well, exactly what we just discussed. How exactly all of the countries that signed on to the Paris Agreement can get to that goal that seems unattainable, frankly, at this point.
And Laila, as Philip pointed out there, the hard bargaining now starting in earnest. One imagines, as you yourself pointed out with the protesters outside, that there will be clashes and arguments with different views and different voices. So not a good idea to underestimate how hard this is going to be.
You certainly cannot underestimate how hard this is going to be. The real question here, Charles, is are world leaders, are negotiators really going to take this as the code red for humanity that we've been told is the situation that we're in? Like Philip pointed out, several agreements have been made in the past relative to new agreements that we're seeing coming up at COP26. And these are agreements that haven't been followed through with. These are agreements and goals that haven't been reached. So it's really a question of are world leaders and negotiators going to take this as the code red for humanity that we've been told is the situation that we're in? To see 1.9 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels as the new prediction is not great news for COP26. It really isn't. However, there are still several more days to go, several more negotiations to happen, and we really just have to wait and see. Right now, a key thing is all about unlocking finance for greener projects, transitioning into greener energy. Really and truly, you can see that there is commitment, but it's all about how that commitment is followed through with. We spoke about this yesterday. It's all well and and good coming here and signing on to agreements, but you have to take those agreements home and domesticate them into your own laws to ensure that we are actually taking this seriously. Climate change is real. No one can deny it. Negotiations continue, and we just have to wait for the outcome.
You know, we've mentioned that word negotiations so many times. A lot of what goes on here behind the scenes is probably very boring. These are very, very slow negotiations, but they are so, so important. Let me tell you a little bit about how this happens. There are dozens of negotiating rooms here, all of them numbered, and all of them with exact times when different negotiating groups arrive. These are not individual countries who negotiate with other countries to come to some kind of a common agreement. These are groups of countries. An African group, for example, is one of those that will be represented by individual countries, though, by negotiators from individual countries. The European Union as well, for example, all the member states of the European Union, they all get together in the morning. They are told by the European Union negotiators what their goal is for the day, what their latest talking points are. Then those negotiators from each country will then go and represent the European Union in those meetings with African countries, for example, and try and come to an agreement. And that is also where those details will be hashed out, because this is so, so detailed. We're talking about a massive agreement, the Paris Climate Agreement, and we're talking about some very, very finicky things that need to be sorted out. The closer we get to the final day of this conference, the more you will hear us talk about Article 6. I won't go into detail right now, and we will also have to read up on it quite a bit. This concerns the carbon market, and you will be hearing a lot about this, because that's one of the really, really big sticking points, not just now, but for the conference already as well. Everybody who came here, all of these negotiators, they knew that that was going to be one of the really, really difficult things to hash out. A little bit boring what goes on in these rooms, but incredibly important.
Well, I have to say both of you are making it sound not so boring. But let me stay with you there, Philip. What more do we know about the British Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak's plan? He is, of course, the finance minister to the rest of the world. I mean, rewiring the global financial system is no small task, is it? And rewiring for net zero is probably going to be an enormous task.
Yeah, it is, and we're talking about trillions of dollars here, aren't we? Not necessarily trillions of dollars that come from a government into financial institutions or into private institutions. These are private institutions, banks, for example, financial institutions that will be investing differently into companies, for example, that want to be carbon neutral, companies that might be fossil fuel companies, companies that might have close ties with fossil fuel companies. So that's where the skepticism comes in. As for the London financial place, that is a very important place to start, of course. It's one of the most important ones in the world, and according to what was announced here today, all of the financial institutions based in London and all the publicly traded companies will have to make clear what their investments are going to be, how green those investments are going to be. That would be a very, very important step, but again, is there a way of really, really controlling that, of really checking up on who is doing what? Well, the devil will be in the details to see whether those agreements really come to bear the help that is needed to curb global warming.
Okay, Philip Crowther and Laila Jonhson-Salami, our correspondents there at the UN Climate Summit in Glasgow. Thank you very much indeed for your analysis and your update.